Learning Goal 4. I can predict the size of a product based on the size of one factor. So before we get too into that, if we think of a product as the answer to a multiplication problem, the factors are just the two numbers you multiply to get there. So that'll be important when you take a look at these questions that we have. So first we're going to talk about the difference between adding fractions and multiplying fractions, because when you think about the word problems that you'll see, 2/3 in this case, we would say this 2/3 plus 1/3. So you're putting them together, you're adding them. When you're multiplying, you won't usually say 2/3 times, it'll usually say 2/3 of. That's going to be a really important word to remember. Little word,
Big difference.
very important.
Yeah.
2/3 of 1/3 means multiplying. So we're going to talk about how adding and multiplying the fractions can change, I'm sorry, not adding. The multiplying fractions can change the size based on how big of a number it is that you're multiplying by. So when you're adding numbers together, you're making them bigger. Right? No matter what, you're going to be making them bigger. When you multiply, and there's just a proof of that. When you multiply, you are doing something a little bit different. You're taking a piece of it, which makes it smaller when you're multiplying by a fraction, because you're taking something of it. So I know that sounds a little confusing. When you multiply whole numbers, you make really big numbers, but multiplying by fractions actually makes it smaller.
Yeah.
Unless, and you'll see an example in just a second. So,
Is this me?
this one's you. Yep.
Okay. So now we're just going to think about these problems right here. And you'll notice here, 3/4 is in all of these problems. So
Right.
you want to think to yourself, does that show that there? Yeah. How will the answers compare to this factor right here? Right. So we have 2/6 of 3/4, or 6/6 of 3/4, and then 1 3/8 of 3/4. So just maybe take a moment right now and think about that. Will they be less than 3/4, greater than, equal to? And then we'll walk you through those. Oops. So looking here, we have 2/6, and now that you're getting really good with fractions, you know that that is less than 1.
Right.
So since 2/6 is less than 1, it must be less. Your answer must be less than 3/4 then.
Right.
So if you take the time to actually solve this problem, then your answer is 6/24, and that can be simplified to 1/4, which of course is smaller than 3/4 then. So we're just proving it to you now.
So if you're multiplying a fraction by a fraction that is smaller than 1, you're going to have, your answer will be smaller than that first factor. There's a lot of mathy words going on.
Now we're going to look at this next one here, and we have 6/6, and a lot of you are right away thinking, well, it has to be equal to 1. And so this one's nice and easy. 1 of 3/4 is just going to be equal to 3/4 then. And if we actually do this problem just as 6/6, we get 18/24, and then once again simplified would be 3/4. So yep, equal to 3/4. Now looking here with this mixed number, of course a mixed number is a whole number and a fraction, so it's bigger than 1. So in this case, if this fraction is bigger than 1, then it must be greater than 3/4. So once again, if we take the time to actually do this problem, and I just converted this, 1 3/8 is equal to 11/8. That's going to be 33/32, and then once again converting into a mixed number. So this number definitely is bigger than 3/4.
Yep.
So hopefully that sort of gives you an idea of how to predict what your answers should be, or at least close to those answers.
Right. I mean, because if you're looking, if you're looking at these numbers, I know it just sounds sort of confusing. But if we're just thinking of comparing the answer to the fraction, or to this factor here, based on the other factor, and just knowing whether that factor is bigger or smaller or equal to 1/1 will give you your estimate or your prediction. So pause and try these. We've got 4/5 times 6/7, 1 3/8 times 6/7. So again, 6/7 is our commonality here. So the first thing I want you to predict is whether or not your answer is going to be greater than, less than, or equal to 6/7. So in here, in this little circle, you're going to be filling in the greater than, less than, equal to sign. And then you're going to actually find the answer. And then do the same thing here and here. So predict first, then solve. Okay, so when I'm looking at these, well, I know 6/7, 4/5 is less than 1. So based on what Mrs. Van Dam just said, if my factor is smaller than 1, then my answer is going to be less than 6/7. So when I go through and actually solve them, I multiply them straight across, I end up with 24/35. And that is less than 6/7, which if you want to go through and make it into a common factor, shadow. You would find if you get common denominators and you compare them, you would see that it is less than 6/7. For 2, if I look at this, well, this time my factor is larger than 1, so my answer is going to be larger than this other factor. It's going to be bigger than 6/7. So when I multiply them out, I end up with 66/56, which automatically tells me we were right. Our answer is bigger than 6/7. But that's not simplified yet, so now I'm going to simplify it down, turn it into a mixed number, 1 and 10/56. And this one, there may be more common factors, but I know 2 is one because they're both even. So,
ow.
Shadow. So I'm going to divide these both by 2, and we end up with 1 and 5/28 as your final answer. So I think this one's you now.
Okay, so now it's your turn. You're going to, same thing, predict and then solve. So yep, same format here, 9/7 times 2/3, and then 3/7 times 2/4. So just look back, think about what we did earlier, and then actually solve those problems.